Many books have been written and documentaries made about the cult leader phenomenon. We treat it like one of those timeless psychological mysteries, the good old nature versus nurture debate. But what if it is neither? What if it isn't nature versus nurture, or even a combination? What if it is something entirely different? And what if we do know how cult leaders are made? Not you and I personally, not the average person, but someone somewhere. In the last episode, I talked about how the Peripatetics under Aristotle weren't just philosophers. They were the intelligence agency for the ancient world. In this episode, we're going deeper. We're going to look at the Peripatetics and their role in creating religious cults, and how the blueprint they developed didn't vanish with antiquity. It just got more sophisticated and harder to spot. In this section, Lyndon LaRouche claims that several modern religious movements, like the Hare Krishnas, the Children of God, and the Unification Church, also known as the Moonies, weren't organic spiritual groups, but synthetic cults engineered by the British intelligence network. Now, to be clear, this is Lyndon LaRouche's theory. If you try to prove it with historical facts, you might find it hard to do so. I'm not asking you to believe it just because he wrote it. What I am doing in this series is walking you through what Lyndon LaRouche was saying in 1978 and asking, if we take his framework seriously, do we see the patterns he describes? And can we see those patterns throughout history? If these were just conspiracy theories, would we see the same patterns of control showing up again and again in different eras? The problem is, most people won't even consider these ideas because they are waiting for someone in a position of power to confess. But that is never going to happen. No one is ever going to come out and say, yes, we engineered that cult. Just like they're never going to tell us the truth about Jeffrey Epstein, 9/11, or the Kennedys. The best we can do is observe the patterns. And honestly, I'd argue thinking critically and thinking creatively is the humanist thing to do. Back in one of the first episodes, I said the devil is in the detail. At the time, I didn't fully appreciate the double meaning. The details do matter. But if you focus too hard on them, you'll miss the bigger picture. You won't see the forest for the trees. And that, I think, is what LaRouche wants us to do. When he wrote this journal, he gave us just enough details to see the patterns, without drowning us in distracting details. So let's zoom out and see what emerges. Let's start with where the blueprint came from, Babylon. Cults have never just been some extraordinary man with a god complex and his gullible followers. They have always been an instrument of statecraft, a quiet weapon used in both domestic control and foreign policy. According to LaRouche, most ancient cults, right up until the Christian era, followed a similar template. Pantheons filled with hybrid gods. In case you don't know what a pantheon is, it's simply a collection of gods worshipped by a culture. Central to these beliefs were polymorphs, gods depicted as part human, part animal, or even a fusion of multiple beasts. Think lion-headed warrior, bird-faced deities, and serpent-bodied gods. These weren't just religious symbols, they were political weapons. If your gods are half human, half beast, what does that say about humanity? It reduces human beings to the status of animal. And if humans are just clever beasts, then why do they deserve to be treated any better than cattle? LaRouche calls these the original green religions. The ancient cult makers didn't just create belief systems. They also developed psychological techniques to protect these beliefs and ensure compliance. First, you appeal to authority. You create a priestly class and declare only they understand the mysteries. Embrace paradox. Tell the people their God is both alive and dead, human and animal, one and many. And when they try to make sense of it, you stop them. You tell them they are sacred mysteries. Don't question, just accept. Reframe doubt as sin, because some mysteries are just too sacred to scrutinize. Make the act of questioning a sign you lack faith and purity. Initiation. Knowledge must be earned, not given. Create barriers, rituals, tests, or years of study, because investment creates commitment. The more someone sacrifices to join, the harder it becomes to leave. By the time they reach the inner circle, they're trapped by their own journey. Punish dissent. If someone questions the mysteries, they must face consequences. Make the people believe their reputation, their livelihood, or their place in the community will be destroyed. And make sure it's done in public. Let everyone see what happens when someone steps out of line. After that, the people will silence their own doubts, and they'll denounce each other to prove their loyalty. The members become their own enforcers. In ancient times, religion was wielded as a tool used to engineer a compliant population. A big part of this was the idea that the universe is mysterious, chaotic, and unknowable. Keep that message in mind, because you will see this again in a different era, different priesthood. Logos is the idea that the universe can be understood and that humans have dignity and potential. In opposition to this is the mystery cults that believe knowledge is forbidden and dangerous. Throughout history, LaRouche identifies two competing forces locked in battle over humanity. On one side, the humanist city builders, people aligned with technological progress, reason, and human potential, whose myths elevate humanity. They tell stories with heroes who embody knowledge, creativity, and reason. Think Prometheus bringing fire to mankind. On the other side, anti-humanist oligarchies who distort mythology to serve control. Take ancient Israel during the time of Saul, David, and Solomon. This region functioned as a strategic buffer zone between powerful Mediterranean civilizations. The Phoenicians were master city builders, renowned for their engineering, maritime trade, and construction. At the time, the spiritual landscape wasn't monotheistic. They didn't just worship one god, they worshipped many. It was a blend of old local cults, such as Baal worship. Whoever controls the mythology controls the population. Which brings us to the 1920s, when the oligarchies realized they needed to update their methods. By this time, religion had lost its grip on the people. Science was the new authority and technology was advancing. People believed reason could unlock the secrets of the universe. And battle lines were drawn once again. Only this time, you had scientific progress on one side and on the other, the forces trying to kill it. At the heart of this plan to subvert science was Bertrand Russell, who LaRouche claims was deeply embedded in British intelligence, and who spearheaded a covert project to reshape global thought. The target? What LaRouche calls continental science, a tradition built by pioneers like Max Planck and Erwin Schrödinger. But one man acting alone doesn't equal a conspiracy. In October 1926, Erwin Schrödinger visited Copenhagen to meet with Niels Bohr. The two men spent days locked in intense debate. The sticking point? Quantum jumps. Bohr insisted that electrons made discontinuous leaps between energy states. Instantaneous, random jumps that couldn't be predicted or understood mechanistically. While Schrödinger's wave mechanics replaced them with smooth continuous waves, seeming to eliminate these jumps, Bohr wouldn't budge, and neither would his assistant at the time, Werner Heisenberg. Heisenberg had co-developed matrix mechanics with Max Born and Pascual Jordan, a mathematical framework for quantum mechanics that depended on quantum jumps being real. As you can imagine, the debate ended in a stalemate. No resolution, no consensus, just two incompatible versions of reality. Then came the fifth Solvay Conference in October 1927, where 29 of the world's greatest physicists gathered in Brussels. The conference became the stage for what would be remembered as one of the most important intellectual battles of the 1920s. The event? Einstein versus Bohr. Albert Einstein refused to accept that quantum mechanics had abandoned determinism and causality. At one point, he famously declared, "God does not play dice." To which Bohr replied, "Stop telling God what to do." I find it interesting that God played such a notable part in science in the 1920s, especially since they don't really coexist in this day and age. The two are rarely discussed together. The debate raged for days in Brussels, then continued for years at conference after conference. This clash wasn't just about equations. It was a fight over the fundamental nature of reality. In the end, Bohr's interpretation won, and the Copenhagen interpretation became the dominant view. For nearly a century, physics students were taught that Bohr won the debate, that quantum jumps were instantaneous, discontinuous, and fundamentally random. But here's the twist. LaRouche wrote about this in 1978 and died in February 2019. He didn't know what we know today. He didn't know that science would validate his suspicions about patterns of control. In 2019, researchers at Yale University did something extraordinary. They caught a quantum jump in mid-flight. They watched it unfold in real time. And what they found changed everything. Quantum jumps aren't instantaneous. They're gradual and continuous. They unfold over microseconds, fast, but definitely not instantaneous. Schrödinger was right about the fundamental continuity of the process. He was also right that abandoning determinism and causality was premature. For 90 years, the irrationalist interpretation that quantum mechanics was random, discontinuous, and unknowable was orthodoxy. Anyone who questioned it was dismissed and alternative approaches were ignored. The goal was never to find the truth. It was to convince the brightest minds in physics that truth couldn't be found. The interpretation that won, despite having viable alternatives, was the one that served the agenda and fit the narrative. Reality is fundamentally mysterious and unknowable. So when I was reading about Bohr's unknowable stance, I started wondering, if something's unknowable, couldn't that just mean we haven't found a way to explain it yet? Then I started thinking about the math. If the math works, why doesn't it explain everything all the time? Why are there still paradoxes? Could it mean we've created a tool that doesn't truly explain reality? Think of it like this. Different languages can be used to describe the same reality. For example, car in English is car. The word for car in Japanese is kurama. Different words, same object. In reality, it doesn't matter what you call it. The car exists whether you have a word for it or not. Is that the same for mathematics? Remember Bohr and Schrödinger's debate, discontinuous jumps versus continuous waves. They both used essentially the same underlying math, but they were both saying completely different things. In the end, Bohr's theory was ultimately proven wrong. But the math worked, and for 90 years, that was enough. It worked because we are taught math is concrete, objective, the language of pure truth. What if it is just like any other language, a tool we created to describe reality? And just like any other tool, it can be used accurately or deceptively. Bohr's equations were mathematically valid. They obeyed the rules. They made his theory work. But quantum jumps are what they are, gradual, continuous, and observable. Did Bohr make an honest mistake? Or did he understand math in this sense? Did he understand it had the same vulnerabilities as language? Remember the 5 cult psychological techniques. Let's apply them to science. Only the chosen physicists get to determine what is true. Only the ones from the right institutions with the right credentials. Accept science as the only legitimate way to explain reality, while also accepting some aspects are inherently mysterious and unknowable. This one can be done by punishing dissent, ostracize, mock, and publicly humiliate those who dare to step out of line. Years of graduate level mathematics to ensure doctrination and prove yourself worthy to join the priesthood. The same psychology, same goal. Science is the modern day mystery cult. But Russell's mission to subvert science didn't stop at corrupting physics. His approach included mass mind control through the strategic use of scientific advancements, in particular, the widespread deployment of drugs. According to LaRouche, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World was more than just a novel. It was a tool used to serve the British agenda by promoting psychedelic drugs and drug culture under the guise of enlightenment. The end goal, mass addiction. What does that remind you of? When I read that, the first thing that came to my mind was the opium wars and the fentanyl epidemic. In the 19th century, the British Empire perfected this by flooding China with opium, despite knowing the devastating effects. Today, the fentanyl epidemic is killing hundreds of thousands of Americans annually. When you look at this from LaRouche's perspective, it becomes pretty damn hard to believe this isn't by design. But it doesn't stop there for Russell. He was also directly involved in developing a new approach to language, what became known as linguistics. the kind associated with the Rand Corporation, a military think tank. This approach separated language from meaning. For example, a child might ask, "Why is the sky blue?" The traditional approach to language would be to give the child a scientific explanation so that they understand something true about the world. However, Chomskyan linguistics is about separating language from meaning, creating grammatically correct English statements that are meaningless. In modern-day terms, think word salad. A good example of this is a politician who says something like, "We must take action to address the concerns of working families." On the surface, it sounds meaningful. But what are they actually telling you? It doesn't tell you what actions will be taken. It doesn't tell you what concerns will be addressed. This technique is a powerful weapon because you can manipulate people with empty statements that say a lot but promise nothing. Not only that, you can manipulate people en masse, millions of people simultaneously through mass media or political speeches. In this episode, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's bring it back to where we started. Do we know how cult leaders are made? LaRouche says yes. And here is what makes LaRouche's work so powerful. He's not asking you to believe in a single conspiracy. He's asking you to recognize patterns and methods. How cult leaders are made isn't a psychological mystery to the inner elites. Cult leaders are a tool used by elites to control the flow of knowledge and suppress human potential. It might surprise you to know that we are experiencing the evolution of this tactic right now in real time. The under 16 social media ban by the Australian government. The official narrative, protecting children from online harm. I'm not saying social media doesn't have its problems. Don't hear what I'm not saying. There are legitimate concerns. But let's be honest, the government gives zero fucks about kids. They just don't. But they do care about knowledge and how information affects their ability to govern. And let's be honest, most of these politicians aren't the brightest light in Beacon. Just look at this freaking clown.
My name's Charlotte Walker. I'm a senator and I'm 21 years old. This is your sign to drink water, to eat your vegetables, to get a good night's sleep, to slay, and most importantly, to follow me.
You can't have the people on a whole smarter than this, or they won't fall for your Chomskyan verbal diarrhea. So let's apply what we've learnt so far. Trust the government. We know what's best for you and your children. Social media is simultaneously vital for democracy and free speech, but too dangerous for anyone under 16 to access. If you question this ban, you obviously don't care about child safety. Information now has an age limit because they need the formative years to mould young minds in an attempt to stop people from just asking questions and making memes about elbow. Kids, stop that. It hurts his feelings. Financial destruction for platforms that don't enforce the ban. As you can see, same 5 techniques, same cult psychology. Here's the thing. This isn't stopping with kids. On the 27th of December, adults in Australia will have to verify their age to access the internet. Non-Aussies, don't fool yourself. This won't stop in Australia. Australia is the test case, the pilot program. If it is successful here, if they can implement it without mass resistance, it will spread worldwide. This is being watched by governments around the world. If Australia can pull it off, other countries will follow. This is COVID vaccine passport 2.0. We didn't resist then, and if we don't resist now, who knows what is next? This is the Babylonian playbook in action, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This is the elites with the help of governments taking full control of knowledge on a worldwide scale. After this, they will have reality on lockdown. Control religion, you control what people believe. Control science, you control how people understand reality. Control information, you control the past, present, and future. My question to you is, now that you see the patterns, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit back and let them take your rights away? Or are you going to step out of the system and show them exactly what happens when the people who power the machine decide to stop powering it? This will work because they don't fear your opinion. They fear your absence. They fear what happens when millions of adults all at once stop scrolling, stop clicking. When we withhold our data, we withhold their revenue, their behavioral models, their predictive algorithms, their political influence, and their entire digital empire. This is not a tantrum. This is not a trend. This is a peaceful, legal, unstoppable act of civil resistance. We are the generation of data. We are the fuel of the algorithm. We are the heartbeat of the digital economy. If they try to strip away our rights, then we have a duty, not just a right, to show them exactly what happens when the people withdraw their consent. Until next time, may the truth be with you.